Today's session will be on answer writing for your optionals. Why is it that the optional paper matters? That general studies is actually a game of margins. As to what is your reason behind the selection of an optional subject, is that across these optionals there are two papers, paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 is 250 marks, paper 2 is 250 marks. Answer writing for optionals is very different from answer writing for general studies. You will have to choose your optionals very wisely, and like I said, there are three things that you have to keep in mind. Good evening, aspirants. Welcome to day 5 of Mission Main series by PW Only IAS. Today's session will be on answer writing for your optionals. But before we discuss answer writing for our optionals, let us first try and understand the importance of optionals. Why is it that the optional paper matters? Now, first reason is simply the weight distribution. If you look at your total score for mains, the combined marks of all subjects, including general studies, essay, and optional, is 1750, out of which 500 marks will be decided by the optional subject itself. That means around 28% of your total main score will be decided by the optional subject itself. So much so that it is one of the most scoring components of your mains examination. And yes, it is a rank decider. In fact, what I normally recommend to my students is that they should look at the selected candidates, preferably the top 100 ones. Look at their score in their optionals. Very rarely do you find them getting an optional score which is outside of this range, 280 to around 320. That means your selection, especially your selection in a higher rank, will fundamentally depend upon your score in your optionals. Now, not just this, what else is the importance of optionals is the return on investment. If you look at generally what do students get across general studies, you will find that the average of those candidates who get selected across general studies papers is around 90 to 110. In fact, as a thought experiment, when you look at the marks of all selected candidates, you try and arrange them in an increasing order, take out the outlier cases. We do not have to include the outliers, which is probably the first 5 or the first 10 candidates who scored the highest in general studies, and amongst selected candidates, those who scored the lowest in general studies. If you take away the outliers, you will find that there is a definite range. Amongst all selected candidates, when you look at their general studies score, the range of marks is somewhere between 40 to 50. That means the distance between the candidate who got selected and scored on the lower end of the spectrum and the distance between a person who got selected and scored on the higher end of the spectrum will typically be around 40 to 50 marks. Now, this is across 4 general studies papers. This roughly translates to around 12.5 marks per paper. And every general studies paper will include 20 questions. This means that this is less than 1 mark per question. This means that general studies is actually a game of margins. Now, whoever gets the highest score in general studies, you may not always find that their strategy is also going to work for you. And especially when you move from one attempt to the second attempt, a significant part of general studies will also change because it's a very dynamic paper. Current affairs are going to change for the subsequent year, and hence you will be required to study a little bit more. Compare general studies with your optionals, you will find that optionals come with a great return on investment. Why? Because by and large, optionals are going to remain static. They're not going to remain very dynamic. There is a focused syllabus, and this focused syllabus requires deep understanding. And if you have given significant amount of effort towards building this understanding, you will bear better returns year on year and attempt after attempt. The same effort, just a little bit of fine tuning, and each attempt you will find you are scoring more than the last one. Now, this is the importance of optional subjects. One more importance of optional subjects is in terms of their selection. You will have to be absolutely certain as to what is your reason behind the selection of an optional subject. Now, one reason is that some optionals, they converge, or there is some bit of an overlap between that syllabus for that optional subject as well as general studies. Optionals such as political science and international relations, such as public administration, sociology to an extent, even geography for that matter. These have consistently been one of the most popular optional subject choices. The reason is their overlap with general studies. There is a paper in General Studies 1 which concerns itself with Indian society. So if you have had sociology as an optional, you will not find it too difficult to answer those questions. GS2 has a significant overlap with PSIR and sometimes even public administration. Similarly, geography also finds some relevance towards General Studies 1. So while you are selecting your optional, this could be one important factor, which is the convergence of the optional subject with your general studies. But mind you, this should not be the determining factor. Now, ideally, what I recommend to students is that in terms of your optional subject selection, there are two prime considerations. The first consideration is how scoring is that optional. The second consideration is your interest in the same. Now, ideally, students keep this as priority number one. But what I recommend to students is the first priority has to be given to how scoring that optional subject is. And the second priority should be your interest. Some optional subjects come from areas of your interest. Some optional subjects you can straight up eliminate because they go outside of your sphere or competence, while some optional subjects you can reject it on the ground of you not being very interested in their subject matter. It could be very dry. For instance, for me, public administration is just not an area of my interest. So I will straight up refuse to take up public administration. Now, between these two aspects, like I said, the first preference has to be given to how scoring that optional subject is. Because ultimately, what will decide whether you get selected or not will be your score. So this is the priority number one. Priority number two should go to the interest. Why? Because in an exam where only 1,000 candidates are going to be selected out of a total of 5 lakh, there is every chance that you may have to write this exam again. Would you want to read a subject that you're not interested in over and over again? This becomes a pain, and hence interest is also very important. The third factor could be the convergence of your optional subject with the general studies itself. Now, these could be some of your deciding factors in terms of picking up an optional subject. Now, let's look at the format of the optional subject. The format is such that in each optional paper, and we are talking about humanities optionals here, more specifically, there will be two sections, section A and section B. Each of these sections has 4 questions. Question number 1, which comes from section A, question number 5, which will be a part of section B, both of these questions are compulsory. That means you have no choice, you will have to attempt them. From the remaining 6 questions, you will have to choose any 3. So you can go for 2 questions from one paper and 1 from another. Or that means 2 questions from paper A, 1 from paper B, or it could be 1 question from paper A and 2 from paper B itself. This is something that you have to understand. Why? Because technically you're controlling 60% of what you write. Of the 5 questions that you have to attempt in total, 2 have been pre-decided. There is no choice. That means the remaining 3 questions out of 5, which is 60% of what you're going to be writing, is exactly in your hands. So choose these questions absolutely, certainly. You have to be absolutely certain of what you're going to be writing about. Now, the next thing which has to be taken into consideration is paper 1 versus paper 2. Now, like I said, keep this in mind that we are basically talking about the more popular humanities-based optionals. Normally, what you will find is that across these optionals, there are 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 is 250 marks, paper 2 is 250 marks. Now, paper 1 is rather static and requires conceptual depth. These are mostly going to be around thinkers, their theories, around some topics which are rather static in nature. An understanding of paper 1 is then applied in paper 2, which is normally the component which is rather more contemporary, more modern, and also a little bit more India-centric. If your understanding of paper 1 is good, then that understanding helps you cross over to paper 2 also. But with paper 2, you will have to also build some current affairs linkage. That means in terms of the topics that you're going to be covering, you have to also be looking at the developments which are happening across the world. This works especially for sociology as an optional too. That means in terms of you preparing, in terms of your material, paper 1 is rather static. Focus on the conceptual understanding of paper 1, focus on writing about paper 1, and then this understanding will translate into lesser effort towards paper 2. But yes, in paper 2, you will have to keep yourself aware of what is happening in the world. Now, like I said, answer writing for optionals is very different from answer writing for general studies. In general studies, what is expected out of you is a basic general awareness of the topics at hand. While in optional, you are required to have at least a bachelor level understanding of the syllabus at hand. Therefore, whenever you're writing your answers in your optionals, you will have to use subject specific terms and thinkers. This is not very critical, or this is not as important for general studies. Also, you'll have to quote studies, you'll have to quote theories, you will have to have your answers looking a little bit more academic rather than what we may want to say general. Your answers better be more academic. What is expected out of you is different in optionals compared to general studies. In general studies, only thing which is checked is a general awareness. You don't have to be an expert. So you don't have to go too deep into those topics. While with optional, you will require at least a bachelor level understanding. That means what is expected out of you is academic answers, not general answers. This is a prime requirement which has to be kept in mind. Now, like I said, what will eventually decide your score in your optional subject is first optional selection. You will have to choose your optionals very, very wisely. And like I said, there are 3 things that you have to keep in mind. How scoring that optional is, whether you're interested in the subject matter or not, and third could be the convergence of that optional subject with your general studies, exactly in that order of priority. If you choose your optionals wisely, that's half of your work done. And once you have chosen your optional, try to focus on building and understanding first, then try to focus on developing your notes, condense those notes, revise those notes multiple times. But the best way of preparing for an optional subject, especially if it is a humanities-based optional subject, is by writing and writing more. So you'll have to plan your studies on optionals slightly differently compared to general studies. And you'll have to dedicate a part of a week, especially and exclusively towards optionals. This could be something that helps you score more in your optionals. So start early, start well, and start writing. Please don't wait. We'll discuss note making, especially condensation of notes, in the subsequent video to follow. Thank you and have a good day.